It's delicious, she said after she swallowed. Thank you. Mrs. Fletcher cut into her own breakfast. I couldn't help but notice that you put the flowers on the hall table. Mind if I ask why? Audrey hesitated before replying. I think they were meant to be more of a taunt than a gift. Even as the words left her mouth, she realized she shouldn't have said them. A taunt? Mr. Fletcher asked. From who? Someone trying to unsettle me. Audrey cut another bite as she tried to sell that it was nothing. Attorneys do it all the time. They didn't, but the Fletchers probably wouldn't know that. Mr. Fletcher frowned. Should we call the police? She shook her head. I sent a photo of the card to the prosecuting attorney just in case, but I think it was meant as a prank, to throw me off. No threats were made. Please, I didn't mean to upset either of you. Upset? Mrs. Fletcher echoed. We're not upset, my dear. We're angry. To think that someone might actually sympathize with that monster. Well, it's disgusting. It happens more often than you think, her husband replied. There are people out there who have fan clubs for serial killers. Why, even Charles Manson found some poor soul to marry him. Audrey couldn't argue that, but she could change the subject. Instead, she commented on how comfortable and lovely the house was and asked how long they'd lived in Rockland. By the time she'd finished her breakfast, the older couple was all smiles, and Ian Monroe, and serial killer groupies, was forgotten. Though she felt as though she'd given Mr. Fletcher a 20-minute crash course on forensic psychology. She went back to her room, brushed her teeth, packed up, and left for Warren. It was about a 15-minute drive to the prison. Even though her appointment time wasn't until 9:30, she was there at 9, per the instructions given to her for visiting the facility. Maine State Prison was a large, white building, slightly grayed from the elements. If you ignored the wire, fences, and armed guards, it would look more like an industrial building than a maximum security facility. Audrey pulled into the parking lot and found a spot. Before getting out of the car, she checked to make certain her hair and makeup looked presentable. She didn't care if Ian Monroe was impressed with her. His taste was in blondes, but she wanted to make certain she looked put together and professional. And maybe a little intimidating. What was the point of having resting bitch face if you were afraid to use it? She had 2 messages on her phone. She read them while standing between the car and the open driver's door. One was from Margot Temple, president of Ian Monroe's fan club. Technically, it was called the Freedom for Ian Coalition, but it meant the same thing. Audrey had already told them she couldn't speak at one of their meetings while she was working for the prosecution. Now, the woman wanted to know if maybe she'd visit after the trial. She thought it might be interesting for the members to hear both of them discuss their meetings with Ian. If Monroe was meeting with the president and founder of the FIC, his ego must be in need of stroking because, according to the information she'd been given, he hadn't had any visitors other than his mother since they'd locked him up to await trial. Maybe meeting with the woman before the trial would be a good idea. If she could find out what Ian said to her, it might prove useful to the prosecution. Audrey didn't immediately reply to Margot. She wanted to check with Will Grant, the assistant DA, first, and went to the next message. It was from Christopher James, the crime writer, asking if she'd grant him an interview. She didn't respond to that one either. It was better to let a little time pass so that both of them would think she was busy, which she was. But also, she didn't want to give the impression of holding either of them important enough to warrant an immediate response. There was nothing wrong with not wanting to appear eager where those who might be mentally unstable or parasitic were concerned. She needed to be focused on the job she'd been hired to do, and not encouraging the small cult of celebrity that had sprung up around her since her past became public knowledge. People found out you killed someone, and all of a sudden you're interesting. It was a surprisingly warm morning for mid-October. Her coat hung open as she slung her bag over her shoulder and headed for the prison entrance. Inside, it was decorated in what Audrey thought of as corpse colors, grays, creams, and fleshy pinks. It looked better than some institutions she'd visited.